On October 22nd of last year, in the Snake River Canyon, a beloved grizzly bear was struck by a vehicle and killed. She was 28 years old, and her death was mourned by people worldwide. It was a tragically fateful end for a bear who had made a life for herself and her young by tolerating and even using the presence of people in her home of Grand Teton National Park to her advantage. Early on, this bear became a crowd favorite because she put up with people watching her. Then, as a young mother, she learned that if she kept her cubs in close proximity to the humans, it protected them from predatory male bears that would attack them. This brought her even more attention and fame, as you might imagine. After all, who can resist the chance to observe a mama bear and her cubs, right? Especially one who seems okay with you being there. She raised 18 cubs in her lifetime, 8 of which made it into adulthood. What I find most compelling about this bear's life story is the level of problem solving, intelligence, and adaptability, dare I even say creative thinking, that allowed for not only the flourishing of her family, but also the flourishing of a diplomatic relationship with human observers, many of whom are on vacation, which as a fellow human, I'm not even so good at putting up with. To be able to adjust and thrive in a human-dominated environment, as my kids would say, that's a flex. Where we might see loss of habitat and wring our hands at our inability to leave nature alone, this bear saw a solution. It was a kind of mutually beneficial relationship, symbiotic in a way, between this bear and her fan base. Her legacy has increased bear awareness and underscored the need for conservation. She was only ever known to us as Bear 399, which was given to her by researchers. Bears have long held prominent roles in mythology and folklore all over the world. Even our night skies tell bear stories. The constellation Ursa Major is a bear. In many cultures, bears are spiritual animals. Sometimes they are given evil or troublemaking characteristics, but mostly they are associated with wisdom, strength, courage, protection, and healing. Hibernation links bears to regeneration and rebirth. Stories of bears with these qualities are found in Japan, Finland, Russia, and Latin America, for example. Here in the Great Lakes Basin, the Anishinaabe family of indigenous tribes have the legend of Sleeping Bear Dunes. According to that story, which you may know, a mother bear and 2 cubs are fleeing a forest fire, and they attempt to cross Lake Michigan. The exhausted cubs didn't make it very far and drowned near the shore. The Great Spirit, moved by the mother's grief, created 2 islands, North and South Manitou, in the cubs' honor, and a large dune to represent the mother bear's vigil. Bear 399 certainly demonstrated many of those qualities. The story of Naaman also has an unnamed character in it. Like Bear 399, her brilliance and innovation shine brightly. She too overcomes her circumstances with a deck stacked against her. In a situation others would call hopeless, she imagines possibilities for the flourishing of others. However, the one she is inspired to help is not her own progeny, but rather her captor, her oppressor, an enemy of her people. Off and on through 1st and 2nd Kings, Israel is at war with Aram. And though it is only mentioned briefly, we understand the implications for the young female Israelite. We know the possibilities of the horrors she could have experienced, the terror and trauma of being a vulnerable young woman considered to be the spoil of war, as if she were property and not a person, and then ripped from her family and the only life she knows, she is forced to serve in the home of Naaman the Aramean. Without diminishing whatever heart-wrenching story hers might be, her goodwill towards Naaman, the compassion she extends to him, bears the mark of her faith in Israel's one and only God, a faith she must have clung to when her life seemed like it was nothing but rubble and refuse. We can acknowledge her pain and also see that when we are tended to by God in life's most desperate and devastating times, when that divine love penetrates the cracks and begins to heal, the beginnings of forgiveness are possible. That she is able to see Naaman, even for a moment, as a fellow human in need of care. She demonstrates that she is a wise young woman of deep faith. If only my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. She innovates, and kings do her bidding. More than Elisha's directive for Naaman to immerse himself in the Jordan 7 times, these words are the most profound in this story. Is this not so often what ministry comes down to? Our ability to see a need at the inspiration of the Spirit, to recall the resources we know of, and to imagine the possibility. It's nothing more and nothing less than being in tune to God enough to say, hey, I know a guy. And then not to quench the Spirit or not dismiss the thought as ridiculous, so that the tiny sprout of an idea can become a tangible help to someone. St. Luke's is very good at this work. People need diapers, we start a diaper bank. People coming out of homelessness need furniture, we provide it. Folks in our community need clothes, we start a closet. These ministries, collectively or individually, started with creative thinking, probably with someone at some point saying to God and or to someone else a kind of if only statement. Now, our dedicated work in these ministries has spawned something new, a support group for grandparents who are parenting. And in September, we look forward to adding that to our portfolio of offerings for the community of Kalamazoo. By the end of Naaman's story, the young Israelite is mostly forgotten. We are wrapped up in celebrating Naaman's recognition of Israel's God being the one true God, and his skin's miraculous healing. These are good things to pay attention to. But if it weren't for her sensitivity to Naaman's need and her desire to match that with God's healing power through Elisha, it could never have happened. Elisha and Naaman would have never met. We would not have that delightfully paradoxical moment when Naaman's horses and chariots are parked outside of Elisha's house in a scene I think would be kind of the equivalent of a Cybertruck or a Lamborghini with those fancy scissor doors being parked outside of the house of someone like Gene the Pumpkin Man. That juxtaposition implying their interaction, their collaboration, the kind of which even today could demonstrate that God is at work. This seemingly impossible thing of the high being brought low and the lifting up of the lowly would have remained an impossibility if it weren't for an enslaved girl experiencing forgiveness and saying, if only, if only. This is not the end of the story of Naaman, but our text for today ends with Naaman's skin being not just healed to its age-appropriate healthy state, but he gets extra. His skin is miraculously restored to the soft, new baby skin of a boy. This story has bookends of the promise of what youth can represent: freedom, vitality, and rebirth at any age. Having a full life with God ahead, a hopeful future anchored in worship of the one true God. Like a bear out of hibernation and humbled by the waters of the Jordan, spiritually Naaman emerges from his seventh dunk, where the servant girl begins, in recognition of God and the healing God desires to give to everyone who would receive it. To everyone, whether in this life they are knighted or unnamed.